Okay, just a quick fact check on a portion of the Vaush Tim Pool debate or discussion or whatever you want to call it. I'd love to make a longer video but I don't have time, so I'll focus on the section where they debate the economic performance of Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Before we begin, don't forget to click or tap the subscribe button and notification bell icon. Okay, are you ready?
Here we go!
Well, wait.
And I think Biden's bad.
I think that Hillary Clinton is an odious person, but when it comes to basic policy issues like climate change or like what economically you're going to do for the country, I think the Democrats just generally have a better plan for this country than the Republicans.
True. It's been shown that the economy does better under Democrats. Here is Trump acknowledging this, back when his screws were still on tight.
I've been now around long, I think of myself as a young guy, but I'm not so young anymore. And I've been around for a long time. And it just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats than the Republicans. Now, it shouldn't be that way. But if you go back, it just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats than the
It certainly
Republicans.
did well under Clinton.
Well,
but I wouldn't suggest it was so great under Jimmy Carter.
That's true. That's
if
true.
you remember
That's
the interest
true.
rates.
No, I know. It's Jimmy Carter was not in the same thing, but certainly we had some very good economies under Democrats as well as Republicans. But we've had some pretty bad disaster under the Republicans.
On top of that, the GOP just wants to double down on the trickle-down scam of gutting unions and slashing taxes on the wealthy and corporations. You know, the things that have gutted the middle class over the last 40 years and pushed all economic gains to the top.
The best economy in generations.
It's a continuation of Obama-era policies. What policy did he implement?
We had tariffs. We had
But
strict border controls.
Wait,
He
what?
bailed out Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and pumped trillions of dollars into the economy. So it looked great.
One at a
It was
time.
a terrible economy.
Okay, Tim's angry long-haired sidekick is just repeating some talking points he read on some free WordPress right-wing blog back in the day. But yes, bailing out Freddie and Fannie, which happened under George W. Bush by the way, was the right thing to do. It prevented an even worse housing crisis and recession. Furthermore, the bailout was in fact a loan, which was repaid with interest. And yes, putting money into an economy that's in a $4 trillion hole thanks to the worst recession since the Great Depression is the right thing to do. This is why there exists a consensus among economists that the stimulus package helped.
One at a time, the tariffs were maligned by virtually every economist in the country, and he has had to spend an enormous amount of money with subsidies used. Right, exactly. So I don't think that had anything to do with the economy. That could be considered a detriment. When it comes to closing down the border, I have seen no evidence that that's improved the economy. All of the unemployment rate, the GDP, this was a straight line continuation of Obama-era policies.
Obama said you wouldn't reach these numbers, and then he did.
That is not what Obama said, and I can see why Tim Pool avoids having these conversations over Zoom and insists people fly across the country to have these discussions in his COVID cave, where the other person can't fact-check him. Tim is likely referring to Obama's magic wand comment, where Obama was correctly expressing incredulity that Trump was going to somehow bring jobs back from overseas. But before we get to Obama's magic wand comment, let's indulge in some nostalgia over the days of having an economically literate president.
But frankly, part of it's had to do with automation. You go into an auto factory today that used to have 10,000 people, and now they've got 1,000 people making the same number of cars or more. And so what that means is even though we're making the same amount of stuff in our manufacturing sector, we're employing fewer people. Now, the good news is that there are entire new industries that are starting to pop up. And you're actually seeing some manufacturers coming back to the United States because they're starting to realize, you know what, energy prices are lower here, workers are better here, this is our biggest market. And so even though we offshored and went someplace else before, now it turns out we're better off going ahead and manufacturing here. But for those folks who've lost their job right now because a plant went down to Mexico, that isn't going to make you feel better. And so what we have to do is to make sure that folks are trained for the jobs that are coming in now, because some of those jobs of the past are just not going to come back. And when somebody says, like the person you just mentioned, who I'm not going to advertise for, that he's going to bring all these jobs back. Well, how exactly are you going to do that? What are you going to do? There's no answer to it. He just says, well, I'm going to negotiate a better deal. Well, How exactly are you going to negotiate that? What magic wand do you have? And usually the answer is he doesn't have an answer.
And he was right. Outsourcing continued under Trump. And in fact, the trade deficit with China only grew. That said, we should not confuse the fact that outsourcing continues with the fact that some jobs are coming back. This is known as reshoring, and in fact, it began under Obama. Furthermore, it could have increased further under Obama had the GOP not defeated a bill that would end tax breaks for outsourcing. In fact, the GOP did what it could to stall the economic recovery for political purposes. They broke the record on filibusters and defeated numerous bills that would have helped speed up the recovery, including the American Jobs Act, which according to Moody's, would have created an extra 1.9 million jobs. Here are Mitch McConnell's infamous words.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
I don't think that changed anything I said, though.
Factories came back to Michigan.
That
massive multi-billion-dollar investment.
Massively overstated the extent to which the manufacturing industry came back. He said it was like tens of that. It was like a couple thousand, and even then, that's your goal, like a couple thousand.
Whenever we get a presidential change, I remember this since I was little. It's like, oh, actually, the success of this president is from the past president, because everybody always does this.
We look at policies, though. So Obama did inherit a mess from George W. Bush. This isn't just like, oh, it was because he came after Bush. It was a objective thing that had happened under Bush's presidency, and Obama's policies allowed the economy to get back on track in a straight line trend that continued into Trump's years. I haven't seen any evidence that Trump's policies meaningfully affected that trend, with the exception of his handling of the coronavirus pandemic, which did end up spiking everything back into the touchdown zone. And of course, that spike down would have happened under any president. It's a pandemic. But recovery has been in large part hampered by a non-existent federal response, and the tone deafness of, again, like, we have conquered coronavirus the day after the worst record number of cases since it all started. This type of leadership, even if we're to leave aside populism and whatever.
It's President Trump on tape and on the record. In his new book, Rage, veteran journalist Bob Woodward writes that on January 28th, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien warned the president about the virus outbreak in China, saying it will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency. 10 days later, Mr. Trump said this to Woodward in excerpts of recordings published by the Washington Post.
You just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
That's what he said privately, but in public later that month, he was still downplaying the severity and spread of the virus.
This is a flu. This is like a flu.
Throughout that period of time into early March, the president kept holding packed campaign rallies. On March 19th, President Trump, again talking to Woodward, delivered this candid assessment.
Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. Just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. It's not just older.
Yeah, exactly.
Young people, to plenty of young people.
It's clear just from what's on the public record that you went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
At this very moment, large, well-organized caravans of migrants are marching toward our southern border. Some people call it an invasion. It's like an invasion. You know, in April, supposedly, it dies with the hotter weather, and that's a beautiful date to look forward to. Now, the virus that we're talking about having to do, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat, as the heat comes in. Typically, that will go away in April. We're in great shape. I think when we get into April and the warmer weather, that has a very negative effect on that and that type of a virus. So let's see what happens, but I think it's going to work out fine. There's been a rumor that, a very nice rumor that you go outside in the sun and you have heat and it does have an effect on other viruses. But now we get it from one of the great laboratories of the world. The virus. They're working hard. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true.